just doesn't work. The strat was nerfed? Yeah, I'm sorry to say.
First, I will immediately reissue my 2020 executive order restoring the president's authority to remove rogue bureaucrats, and I will wield that power very aggressively.
We are in for 4 years of some of the best content that I think we've seen in a long time. You guys have to understand that back when Trump was originally the president, there were like a lot of checks and balances that he had. And now all those checks and balances, they're all on his side. He's going to kill us all, smiley face. Oh, see what's going to happen. People literally die, free content. I think that, well, yeah, I mean, for sure, right? I mean, like, of course, like and by the way, every news station thinks this. I understand that there's like news stations that try to make themselves out like, oh yeah, we don't care about this. News stations love plane crashes. They love like, you know, mass shootings. Of course. Yeah, that's how they make their money.
Second, we will clean out all of the corrupt actors in our national security and intelligence apparatus, and there are plenty of them. The departments and agencies that have been weaponized will be completely overhauled so that faceless bureaucrats will never again be able to target and persecute conservatives, Christians, or the left's political enemies, which they're doing now at a level that nobody can believe, even.
I do think that, like, them going after Trump and trying to prosecute him for all these crimes, I think that, and I said it back then, I said that it was a huge mistake. Because all it does is it paints him out as a martyr, and it's kind of like the, what's the quote? If you come at the king, you better not miss. They missed too many fucking times. And now he's going to do the same thing. And the thing is that, like, there's no moral authority to say, oh, this isn't what's going to happen. Yeah, it's revenge. And also, like, I do think that, again, people won't say this, but there is a massive contingency of Trump voters and Trump supporters that feel like they've been marginalized from, like, not only, you know, like, economically, but society-wide, where, like, you're not supposed to say that you like Trump. You're not supposed to say that, you know, you think this or that other thing. And these people have been oppressed in their mind, whether you believe this to be true or not. Like, again, and I'm going to get in a lot of trouble for saying this, okay? But we love that, don't we? Do you remember when I said that I can very well easily understand why young guys in, like, the Middle East joined ISIS? I can easily understand that. Even though I don't agree with them, even though I think they might be wrong, I can see, okay, if this is the way that you live, these are your material conditions. Yeah, I can see how you go from point A to point B. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So when I'm discussing this, in a lot of cases, I'm not even really talking about whether I think it's a good idea or not. I'm saying that if enough people believe in something like this, it becomes real. And it's real to them. And if something is real to them, then for all intents and purposes, they're going to act like it's real. And nobody has a monopoly on reality. So these people can invent their own reality and act on it, and you can't really stop them. You see kind of what I'm saying? I don't think it's the same, Asmund. No, it is. It is. People get oppressed, and the oppression, the perceived oppression, radicalizes them. It's absolutely true. Most people that do things that are really bad do them as a result of a perception of oppression. Now, sometimes the perception is accurate. Sometimes it's not. But the one thing that's almost always there is that there is a perception. It's that simple.
Impossible. Third, we will totally reform FISA courts, which are so corrupt that the judges seemingly do not care when they are lied to in warrant applications. So many judges have seen so many applications that they know were wrong.
I wonder what one of those applications for one of those people could have. I wonder who that's going to be. Video's eye contact feature. Remind me about that later. I'll look at it.
Nothing about it. They're lied to. Fourth, to expose the hoaxes and abuses of power that have been tearing our country apart, we will establish a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to...
I hear the Halo music playing in my mind. I do. You guys have to understand that there is a probability that Barron Trump came up with this name because he played Halo 1. And he said, Dad, you should call it this.
Tearing our country apart, we will establish a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to declassify and publish all documents on deep state spying, censorship, and corruption. And there are plenty of them.
I think that's good. I feel like a lot of people need to understand, like, when the government, and this isn't really anything that's new. I think that the government has exercised this power for a really long time, and I think it's created a massive sense of distrust with the government. Huge, huge distrust.
Fifth, we will launch a major crackdown on government leakers who collude with the fake news to deliberately weave false narratives and to subvert our government and our democracy.
This is one that I completely disagree with. And I really hope that people talk to him and tell him not to do this. Because you need whistleblowers, because the reason why we know a lot of these bad things happened are because of those whistleblowers. Like Snowden, like Julian Assange. Like, it's a slippery slope? Yeah, exactly. Like, I really disagree with this, and I hope that he doesn't do this. This is really, really bad.
When possible, we will press criminal charges. Sixth, we will make every Inspector General's office independent and physically separated from the departments they oversee, so they do not become the protectors of the deep state. Seventh, I will ask Congress to establish an independent auditing system to continually monitor our intelligence agencies to ensure they are not spying on our citizens.
That's his background music, by the way. It's not like I'm playing like Skyrim or like Halo background music. No, he's doing that for himself.
Citizens or running disinformation campaigns against the American people, or that they are not spying on someone's campaign like they spied on my campaign.
Right.
Eighth, we will continue the effort launched by the Trump administration to move parts of the sprawling federal bureaucracy to new locations outside the Washington swamp. Just as I moved the Bureau of Land Management to Colorado, as many as 100,000 government positions could be moved out, and I mean immediately, of Washington to places filled with patriots who love America.
Oh, boy.
They really do love America. Ninth, I will work to ban federal bureaucrats from taking jobs at the companies they deal with and that they regulate.
That is a huge fucking W. Oh my God. Wow. Yep.
Deal with these companies and they regulate these companies, and then they want to take jobs from these companies.
Yep.
It doesn't work that way. Such a public display cannot go on, and it's taking place all the time, like with Big Pharma. Finally, I will push a constitutional amendment to oppose term limits on members of Congress. This is how I will shatter the deep state and restore government that is controlled by the people and for the people. Thank you very much.
There it is. And so this was made, like, he recorded these kind of a while ago, but I think now that he's like, now that he won, everybody is like looking back on it and they're like, oh shit, like all of these are going to happen. And do you agree? With some things, yeah, he's going to get assassinated. If they assassinate Trump, then J.D. Vance is just going to do the same thing. And also, like, guess what happens when they assassinate him? Then everybody is going to go and be like, oh my God, now they're actually trying to kill us, and they're going to be way more militant than they've ever been. The worst thing that can happen is for him to get assassinated, because it turns him into a martyr. And I think that's the same thing that like all those trials did too. Yeah, they tried twice. That helped him win. Yeah, I think so too. Trump said he could use active military for mass deportations. Well, yeah, of course he's going to do that. I think that, again, this is the problem that a lot of people have, is that I don't think that they want to come to the terms that, like, that's what people voted for. I think that there's a huge contingency of people that's what their goal is. They want that. I saw another one, use military to repel an invasion. This is an invasion. Yeah, I mean, there it is. Do the people saying good don't understand the slippery slope? I think that it can be very problematic too. I think that you're totally right. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Because if there's enough people that support it, then it happens.
Just to go back to Susie for a second, the fact that he got to this first, and the fact that she is going to have, influence over how the rest of this transition unfolds, whether it's picking Attorney General or any of these other high-level positions, I think we ought to all look at this as a wise decision, a good decision, and for everybody out there wanting Trump to pivot or change or somehow whatever you want him to do, he just won a mandate from the American people to execute on the program that he laid out in this election. It wasn't particularly close. And I think he ought to put people in place who are going to do it. That's what the people
will go
are
after
asking
his
for.
enemies. I mean, that's
not what he ran on.
Yes, he did.
See, he can't say this. But I think that if you go down and you interview a bunch of Trump voters, I think that they absolutely want Trump to weaponize the government to attack the people that attacked him. I think that's exactly what they want him to do. Because that's what people wanted to do to Trump. Do it? Yeah. And so, and you can't say this because it sounds bad to say. I think that's what's going to happen.
It is explicitly what
That's not what he ran on.
Look at what he said in the past week. He literally said that he was going to exact vengeance.
You still don't understand how you lost. He ran on immigration.
Don't say me. I'm not a Democrat.
He ran on immigration.
It's, I think that's it. People want catharsis. People want revenge. And I think that people see Trump getting convicted of 34 felonies and they think that it's bullshit. And so they're like, okay, everybody's conspiring against this guy. Well, let's get together and we're going to do the same thing back to them. I think that's what happens. And so, instant regret on her part? Yeah, there you go. He was kind once, he got backstabbed, so he ever wants him to take revenge this time? Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Not revenge, retaliation. Yeah, and I think that the problem is that, it's still not really acceptable for people to, say that. But I actually do think it's a huge reason why a lot of people voted for him, is they explicitly want him to do that. Can't wait till the poor people in the Midwest suffer from tariffs. It's real catharsism. Reap what you sow. I mean, again, all I'm saying is I think that's what's happening. Isn't that super fucked up? People used to bring their families to watch lynchings. That doesn't matter. People are more than willing to do something that's horrible if they think that they're doing it for the right reason. This is nothing compared to that.
He ran on inflation.
I'm not here paid to represent
one of the many things he ran on in addition to
he ran on the issues that people care about. He ran on the economy.
Nobody's saying that he didn't run on those things, but he also ran on vengeance.
Yes.
He did also run on going after the people who went after him.
And journalists.
It was a key feature of all of his speeches.
Yes, Scott, he literally said, I am your retribution, the Biden crime family, lock her up. Went after Sessions repeatedly for not doing what he wanted Sessions to do, which was to indict Hillary or whoever he wanted to indict.
I think that if Trump's first candidacy resulted in Hillary Clinton being in jail, there would have been a higher chance that he got reelected. I think that's what I actually think it would have massively increased it.
Can want his campaign to have been about, tax reform and things like that. That is not what he said on the stump time after time after time.
Also
he talked about going after his enemies.
I'm heartened by the fact that the left still cannot figure it out.
A lot of people that are bringing up the tariffs and everything, I think that a lot of you guys don't understand the fact that the average American doesn't understand what a tariff is or how it works. I think that if you were to ask how many people understand tariffs that are voters, I would say 5% or less. Yeah, probably about 5% or less. So that wasn't really the reason. Less than 1%? Yeah, I mean, it's definitely pretty bad. But I think that's really what's happening here.
Just take the January 6th part of it. He made that a big part of his campaign, that he would, if he were in power, pardon those people. You can't say that that was not on the agenda. It absolutely was.
Of course
what was the campaign about? Why did...
Because this is the way that I think a lot of conservatives see it, is that they see, like, for example, like all of like the BLM riots from back then, and then they saw that a lot of those people seemingly didn't get in trouble, and they weren't dealt with in the way that I think a lot of people wanted them to be dealt with. And I think that now they look at January 6th as like, okay, well, this was our bad thing that we did, but we're getting punished and you're not. So that's why people support letting the January 6 people go. It's simple tribalism. That's it. That's the reason. Because, like, I don't think they should be let go. Absolutely not. But you can see very easily how a person comes to that conclusion. It's obvious.
Okay, but do you think that he's going to do those other things when it comes to the Department of Justice?
I don't know what he's going to do. I'm not.
A big part of the campaign was being a victim. Like, that was a big part of it, was his victimhood. They're coming for you, but they're going to have to get through me. That was his whole line. That is all about the enemies list. That is all.
She's exactly right. She's completely right. He's going to play it down, but they're right. The problem is that everybody knows that, and they voted for it.
I totally disagree.
The deep state. That's not. This is the stuff that he talked about on the stump. Unless you just don't want to listen to him, those are his own words.
I listen plenty.
Scott, if you believe that people who violated the Capitol on January 6th committed a crime, which I would hope you would, because they weren't invited in the way they claimed they were, right? They were not there. They didn't go through security the way the rest of us have to go through to get into the Capitol. They were prosecuted. They were convicted. And now they're serving jail time. And he has said repeatedly that they're political prisoners and he is going to spring them, right?
Yeah, of course.
What does that tell you about how he's going to weaponize the Justice Department, and on whose behalf? On behalf of people who committed crimes for him. For him, not for anybody else.
I mean,
Exactly. That's why he's going to spring them. It's because they're on his side. I think that a very big problem that a lot of the media has is that the media relies on optics in order to push people to opinions that they don't actually have. And the big issue is that the average person might not say this, but the average person thinks it. And that's why you see a lot of dissonance whenever you look at polls versus actual voting behavior. It's because people say things that sound good, but then they actually go to vote, and then they vote for something that's a lot worse. That's society? Yeah. Because polls aren't random? Yeah. Mainstream media tells you who you should be mad at? Well, I mean, I'm just saying, like, what Democrats have weaponized justice system for years. It's time for them to play defense. Well, like, your comment here, like, by the way, like, weaponizing the justice system is bad, right? It's bad whoever's doing it. However, this is what people think, and that's what they're voting on. That's the reason. And so I actually think it is that simple in a lot of cases. So getting inside a building illegally is worthy of jail, but getting inside a country is not. I mean, I'm not making this argument. I'm not saying that. I mean, you want to argue with them, go ahead. But, like, I'm saying that I think that there's a lot of, like, unspoken truth and unspoken reality that mainstream media and a lot of people, even on the internet, are unwilling to approach. And I think that also people think that simply repudiating it and saying that it's bad or that it's evil is enough to just make it stop happening. I don't think that's the case, and I think that it's very obvious that's not the case. So the problem is that people, like, and this is the issue, is that media is built around optics. It's not built around reality, and it's not really built around policy. I think that if you were to poll a lot of average, like, if you were to look at the amount of Trump voters that there were, and you were to ask them, would you be okay with mass deportations, even deporting children that have been born here that have birthright citizenship? I think that you would get a supermajority of yeses. if you could read their minds. They might not say it publicly, but if you could read their minds, I think you would get a lot of yeses.
I admire your, I don't know if I want to call it naivete or optimism that Trump is going to run on the policies you care about deregulation and tax cuts and whatnot. That's just not what his campaign was about.
Well,
That's not what he has indicated.
With all due respect, I've run more campaigns than you, and I know what campaigns are about, and I know why people walk into voting booths.
Why people walk into voting booths and what Trump plans to do when handed the presidency are two different things.
Yep, there it is. And so people are getting real mad about this. That's what his campaign was about. Yeah. And according to CNN, they're brainwashed because they don't understand what they want. What was it about then? And bad argument, but he's not wrong. Americans are afraid to say that they want a dictator president as either liberal or Republican, since both parties only care about their side winning instead of policies. Yeah, I think exactly. And he's still in campaign mode. Yeah. And she's obviously unhinged. I think the problem is that the big issue is that, like, a lot of conversations about this are built around, like, kind of how it sounds to say a certain thing in a certain way. But I don't think that average people care about that optics as much as I would say, like, media does. Yeah, and I think that, like, this sentiment here is exactly why people don't care about January 6th. It's because they're also disingenuous. They're crying about January 6ers going free when they set 2020 rioters free. January 6ers didn't burn entire cities to the ground. And the truth is that no matter what you think about this statement, whether you think this is a true statement or not, this is an opinion that is shared by enough people that it can shift the election. And if enough of those people get together, this opinion becomes the rule. And that's it. And so the problem is that a lot of people think that they think that they can, like, kind of bully people out of, like, these types of opinions. It isn't an opinion, it's a fact. I don't think it's that simple. Just for the record, I don't think this is a I don't think this is a good faith evaluation. However, that being said, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because if other people think that, then that's all there is to it. How much damage does the riot cause? Why? Why do I think it's not a good faith evaluation? Because tons of people got arrested in the riots. Like, literally hundreds, if not thousands of people got arrested in the riots. Some of them went free, some of them didn't go free. A lot of them were charged with crimes, and they did get in trouble. Tons? Yeah, I guarantee you. Like, the riots were massive. Of course they arrested tons of people. And it's the same as also not every single person in January 6th got arrested either. That's really the difference. Most went free. Yeah, I bet probably a lot of the people from January 6th went free too. Like, that's... They got bailed out? Yeah, I mean, is this not true? No shit? Yeah. Yeah, I'm very confused. January 6th only if you went in the Capitol? Yeah. I'm very confused here. 14,000 people got arrested during BLM? Yeah, that's a lot of people. This chat's so lost. The problem is that I think people are so ideologically captured by certain points of view that they're unwilling to cede any ground or to look at anything that doesn't completely agree with them as being legitimate at all. And I think this is like, this radicalization has happened, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse. Chat's past cooked. Yeah, it is. And I don't really have a problem with this, guys. Again, people can disagree all you want. Like, if you're insulting or hostile or rude, then you'll get banned. But if you just want to voice disagreement, then that's fine. The point is that I think a lot of people have become so radicalized by this that anything that they hear that is even 1% off of what they believe to be true, they just lose their minds. They, like, even, and this happens with left-wing people too, right? Like, for example, if you're pro-trans, but you don't think that, you know, trans women should compete against biological women, you're seen as a transphobe. You can be pro-trans, but if you don't think that, you know, trans women should use women's bathrooms, you're like a TERF, right? That's what happened to J.K. Rowling. So the problem is that there are like these infinite purity tests. Zach, you've created an echo chamber. How could it be possible that I created an echo chamber when we're talking about everybody in chat disagreeing? Has it ever occurred to you that maybe that's illogical? Yeah. Somebody says that I don't really know what I'm talking about. Let me go ahead and look at this. So what do you think that I don't know about this? It's an echo chamber because I disagree with you? You don't really disagree? We know where you stand? Yeah. So what is this exactly? You create an echo chamber of disagreement? Yeah, sure. Well, I think that also it really depends on what it is. Every time you say you're not against abortion? Yeah, well, let me see what this is. That's me, gay community. I support trans people, but I said trans women have biological advantage. I got banned from LGBT group. Yeah, I think this is a really good example here, right? And so this is kind of like, this is the problem with radicalization, is that gay community, I support trans people, but I said trans women have a biological advantage and I got banned from an LGBT group. Yeah, there you go. This exact thing happens. Yep, 100%. There's no top. I'll give the person like another minute, then I want to move on. I saw a Reddit post where they said your chat's a far-right echo chamber. Maybe that's what he's referring to. I think the reason why I have a lot of right-wing people in my chat is because I don't ban them. Most other chats, you get banned for having a lot of right-wing opinions, and I don't ban them. So it would logically make sense that they would come to my chat because they wouldn't get banned here. So because I allow people to have opinions, then, you know, I'm considered like an echo chamber? I don't think so. There's a lot of things that add up to why Trump got elected. It's not possible to go over it in a 2-second chat. I give up. You give up because you know that what you're saying is inaccurate. Again, if you want to provide an argument, that's fine. But just calling me stupid and saying that I don't know what I'm talking about isn't really productive, and I don't want to hear that. Sorry. But yeah. Of course, there were a lot of reasons that people voted for him. I think that's obvious. I mean, anybody could assume that. 1,000 people were arrested in Portland, but 0 were prosecuted, so it's a moot point. They literally burned the city to the ground with 0 consequences. I'd have to look and see what happened, but I think also Portland isn't the only city. Happened all over the country. Yeah, the whole city? Yeah. Portland was not burned to the ground? Yeah, I think so too. No, they paid the rioters millions of dollars. Why did IO Cheese getting banned? Oh, he was just being rude. Looks like he decided not to argue. A lot of people like roach out whenever they get called up for something because they, I think that again, if somebody wants to disagree in a way that I find is patronizing or rude, then I just ban them. You have a lot of new chatters in here from the left just waiting for you to fuck up and they're baiting you. I have no problem with that. It doesn't bother me. To be honest, I'm very relaxed and everything's totally fine. I'm not upset about anything. Everything's been going great. Honestly, like, I think chat's been great. You've got to have, and you're going to have some people that disagree or whatever. That's fine. But overall, I think it's fine. Like, that's what happens. I mean, there's a chat room. There's 50,000 people in the chat. What a surprise that there's going to be some people that are dissenters, some people that are disagreeers, some people that don't see it the way that I see it. So I don't really take this as any sort of like a problem or anything like that. There's just going to be disagreements with anybody because there's, you know, that's how normal people look at things. So I don't really see it being an issue. So yeah, the entire summer of nationwide rioting, and it got dubbed the Summer of Love, but oh no, someone moved a podium. Well, and so this is what I'm talking about, right? Is that I think there are two sides of unreasonable behavior that are happening that are being kind of put against each other. So basically, I think that everybody who participated in the riots and BLM and actually destroyed property, I think that they should be criminally prosecuted and put in jail. Period. That's it. Like, there's literally no fine print there. And I think also if you went inside the Capitol building and you actually damaged property or you took anything out of the Capitol building, I also think that you should be in jail. Both of these things are true. If you walked out of that building with anything, you need to spend at least a year in jail. It's not even a question. But, and this is the thing, right, is that people play sides with this, but I think that this is actually what most people think. If you entered all of them, yeah. What if they said BLM in the Capitol? Well, then, oh yeah, then they can go free, right? And so, yeah, that's the way that I see it. What are the chances Zach's been approached by the FBI or some government group and been offered something? I wish they did. That would be great. Yeah, that would be amazing. Chasko is regurgitating, the dude is regurgitating online talking points. Yeah, I think you're right. But if those talking points are believed by a lot of people, then they become real. That's the point. And so, like, and this is the issue that a lot of people have, is they try to make appeals to things like, you know, well, this isn't true, or this isn't accurate, or you're looking at the wrong information. You guys need to understand that we live now in a world where people, like, and this is actually not even true. People have always thought like this. People don't care what your reality is. They care what their reality is. And that's why I've said before, like, the best argument isn't an argument. You can't engage people that have a position on something that is driven by faith or some form of emotion and then expect to reason them out of that position because they never got to that position with reason in the first place. It's an objective reality. Yeah, well, people don't have objective realities. They don't see that. And there's another one, too. I actually forgot to talk about this. But it's how people are, like, breaking into stores and they don't arrest them unless they steal over, like, $1,000 worth of stuff. I think that there's a lot of people that see videos of, like, you know, a handful of people breaking into, like, a fucking, like, a Walgreens or a CVS and then just, like, putting a bunch of shit in a bag and leaving. I think an average person sees that and they say, I want to vote for whatever makes that stop happening. That's it. That ended, didn't it? I'm not sure where it stands right now. Sounds fair? Yeah. And this is the social media.
I think in a normal country, we would say, hold on a second, maybe we need to have a different set of regulations for social media platforms now they're this big.
It would help if we could regulate social media, because one of the biggest offenders is D.C. and Congress have not been able to do one thing in regard to the rogue corporations of social media.
And then moves them through YouTube videos, through podcasts, moves them from that annoyance all the way slowly to a full-blown fascist politic. We don't have the equivalent of Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson to move that man in a feminist direction.
Go fuck yourself. Is that clear? I hope it is.
So this is what's happening, is that now that people are mobilizing on social media, because, like, this guy actually said, I like this guy a lot. Take a look at this.
And here's how we got beat. We got beat because the Republicans and conservatives built a different media system that had to do with online, had to do with podcasts, had to do with streaming platforms, and they were spending their money there. We were laughing at them and knocking on doors in Philadelphia and Detroit. It's like, there's no Trump people. They're not dropping literature. They're not knocking on doors.
Well, in fact, it was laughing like, oh, Elon Musk and Charlie Kirk with their PACs don't know what they're doing.
We were making fun of Donald Trump for having thrown away his ground game and doing some weird stuff online. We thought that they were idiots. It turned out we were the idiots. We woke up in a body bag because while we were knocking on doors, they were making these phones into 24-hour-a-day political weapons for themselves. And so we got outflanked, outplayed, outbeat by people who told us the whole time that they knew what they were doing. And here...
Yep, he's completely right about everything. Absolutely. And this is why they want to regulate social media. They want to regulate social media so they can view and they can, like, categorize people that dissent from them as, you know, somehow problematic and then remove them. This is exactly what used to happen before Elon Musk bought Twitter. That's the reason why they want to regulate it. It's not like they want to regulate it because they're afraid of, you know, any sort of, like, actual problem. They're not afraid of anything, and to the extent that they are, it is primarily about... here we go. We'll look at this here, too. It's really about how social media provides a meritocracy for information. That's really it. They want control. Yeah, they don't want regulation, they want control. And by the way, I am a very big advocate for social media regulation, just not this kind of regulation.
Particularly the media ecosystem it's not a good one, it's a negative one, it's a radicalization funnel. But what they have done in their online media ecosystem is build a radicalization engine, literally the way militant groups do around the world, that takes people from relatively low-level annoyance.
I hope that these people understand that that radicalization engine, do you know who turns the key to turn the engine on? Is them. They're the ones that are beginning this radicalization process by treating people that disagree with them as if they're like racists or sexist or psychos. That's how it started.
With the world. Why are eggs so expensive? Why is my kid learning this new thing in American history in school that I didn't learn? And then moves them through YouTube videos, through podcasts, moves them from that annoyance all the way slowly to a full-blown fascist politics. It's an elaborate...
I don't really think that a lot of people... like, what do they mean by fascist politics? What kind of social media regulation do you think is good? For example, I don't think that anybody under the age of consent should be allowed to make an account on social media. Just for example.
Multi-billion-dollar infrastructure, and there is nothing like it on the pro-democracy side. We don't have when a man is just lost and lonely and not yet radicalized.
I love how they're talking about how they don't have a media system on TV, on MSNBC. How do you say this? How do you do this? It's amazing.
We don't have the equivalent of Joe Rogan and Jordan Peterson to move that man in a feminist direction. By the way, we should educate men.
Well, the reason why is because men reject those people. There are those people out there. Absolutely, they're out there. It's just that people don't want to hear that message because they don't think that that message is accurate. It's very simple.
That it's actually really great to live with a strong woman who makes money. It's actually easier. Life is easier.
But I think
it's just sad, man. It really is. Joe Rogan was a Democrat? Yeah, I guess so. And Jordan Peterson and Joe Rogan used to be liberals. Yeah, I think that's probably true to an extent. And well, actually, it's not true to an extent. It literally is true. It was true. It is true. I find it to be incredibly fucking hilarious that you have people that are on a nationally syndicated television show that has a 100-year nearly hegemony in like news and politics that are complaining that they don't have a voice. You're not complaining that you don't have a voice. You're complaining that nobody wants to hear what you're saying. That's the real reason why you're mad. This is a very interesting topic for me, and I find it to be extremely compelling because obviously, like, I've been on the internet now for like, I'm 34. I've been on the internet for 25 years. I got the internet in like 1999, I think. It might have been 2000, somewhere around there. And I've been on the internet plugged in as long as I possibly could be. Like, I remember, you couldn't, like the AOL CDs. I remember all of this stuff. And so I've seen how all of this has evolved over the years. And I think it's an incredibly interesting way to look at things. I remember, like, I was looking up stuff for, like, N64 and Super Nintendo games on my, on my computer and on the school computers on the internet. I was looking it up on Google and I'm like, wow, this website has everything. So yeah, for me, this is extremely interesting because like I've seen this happening ever since its genesis 25 years ago. And then you saw like, commentary stuff happening probably in like the mid 2000s.
When I woke up this morning, we had lost 5,000 YouTube subscribers.
Wow.
Compared to where we were last night. Now, the first thing I thought was,
let's take a look at that. Ooh, it's minus 10,000.
Is this a glitch?
Mm-hmm.
We've been on YouTube for 15 years or something like that. And subscribers always just go up. They just never go down. They go up. Is something wrong with my channel? Is someone attacking my channel? What's going on? So I started texting.
Mm-hmm.
And I texted Brian Tyler Cohen. And I texted Tyler Cohen and Brian Cohen and Brian Tyler, all of them. I texted all of them. I texted Jesse Dollimore. I texted Luke Beasley and Farron Cousins and Sam Cedar. And
these are like other
every single one of our channels since last night is hemorrhaging subscribers.
Roach out! Everybody get off the ship! Get out! We're sinking! Get out of here! Get out of here! Oh shit! Oh fuck! Obviously, they're running away. That you lost. Of course, people don't want to. Bro, yes, exactly. Of course, it's bot. No, yeah, that's the reason why it happens. It's obvious.
What is it that is going on? Here is.
And also, like, I think that there's a lot of people that are really fucking mad at a lot of these, like, leftist commentators because everything that you've been hearing has been that Kamala Harris had it in the bag. She was going to win. We're going to put Trump in jail and everything's going to be normal again. And then it turns out that you could not have been more wrong. So when you are, and you think about like, what is the function of a media site? What is the function of a media, service or anything? The function is to accurately inform the user about what is true. So if you're listening to a weather channel and they say, yeah, it's going to be a sunny day outside and it's raining, and then the next day they say, yeah, it's going to be a rainy day outside and it's sunny, you're going to be like, I think this weather channel is bad. I'm going to look for another one. And so when you feed people bullshit and you tell people things that aren't true, they're not going to follow you and they're not going to listen to you because they're looking for you to know what's going to happen and to give insight on things. And it's very clear that that insight was completely flawed. That's the reason why people are going to leave. It's because, and there are always going to be people that just, all they want to hear is their own propaganda repeated back at them. Absolutely true. However, it's not that simple. A lot of people lost credibility about knowing how the country thinks. Yeah, exactly.
Is a graphic. As you can see, subscribers just go up, 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 and they are down. It is not just YouTube subscribers. We are seeing record cancellations of paid memberships.
This is true too. So this is that a lot of people want to be on the winning team. If you want people to agree with you, tell them that other people agree with you. It's crazy how hard herd behavior goes with humans. There are multiple observed psychological studies for this. It is like this, it's basically settled science at this point. Like, it's social science. So, of course, people are going to get off the bandwagon when the bandwagon breaks a spoke. It's not going anywhere. They're going to get off. They're going to get on another bandwagon. Of course. How do people like this exist? I think that for a lot of people, it's upsetting for them that this happens. And I think that what happens is that people live inside of their own delusions for long enough, and they convince themselves that they're real. And I think that's what happens the most, is that people become ideologically captured by a point of view, and that point of view becomes so all-encompassing. It's that this person only talks to other people that agree with them. They only see media that tells them that they're right. They have, like all of their friends think the same thing that they do. And they effectively create an echo chamber for themselves. And eventually something shatters that. and they're like, wait, what the fuck? Like, what's going on? And I think also there's a lot of people who don't want that, but they inadvertently put themselves in it. And so these unsubs and people that are leaving the paid memberships, that is a result of it. It's because these are people that wanted to know what was happening, and you were wrong. Pretty simple. And also, more importantly than being wrong, is you lost. Think about it like this on Twitch. Have you ever seen like a Twitch channel that starts losing viewers because it's losing viewers? Have you guys ever noticed this phenomenon happen? Yeah. The chicken bleeding? Yeah.
It is not just YouTube subscribers. We are seeing record cancellations of paid memberships. Record cancellations. These are the people that keep the show running. Now, for a moment, I thought, if it's just YouTube, maybe YouTube is purging people who are inactive subscribers. And once a year, usually YouTube does this, and you see a little decline, and then numbers go back up. They're not doing it. They're not doing it. And if that were the case, we wouldn't be seeing paid membership cancellations on the website. So now I understand what is going on. It's terrifying, but it is happening.
Yeah.
A lot of people are checking out. I heard anecdotally from a couple dozen people who said, you know, David, I just can't do it anymore. I just can't do it. I'm checking out. I'm out. And the reason that this is terrifying, not only because it puts everybody in left-wing media's livelihoods at stake and at...
Well, they put their own livelihood at stake by creating content that was inaccurate. That's the problem. Like, so if I look at my YouTube channel, and I actually just pulled mine up. So we are massively down. We are down 50%. Do you want to know why? Because we took over 2 weeks off of YouTube. We came back, 4 million, 4 million, 3 million, 5 million views. We have been popping the fuck off. Been absolutely fucking insane. So yeah, and yeah, we're back in it. We're back in it. We're farming again. And you want to know why? It's because people look back at the old videos. Oh, wow, we're actually almost at 3 million views. I didn't even see that. And so the reason why being banned is good, well, no, it was not good for the YouTube channel for sure. Like, definitely, like, we went down a lot. Like, we were at 132K video views. But the reason why, it's because we took a huge break. That's really the reason. Like, we took a break from the channel, and so now we're back. It'll take some time, and then that's it. And so, yeah, billion. We almost have 3 billion views on the YouTube channel now. And so, check monthly stats from the day you got banned. But you can see why people are not unsubscribing from my channel. It's because people can go back and they can look at the things that I said about different, like, situations. And I've got to tell you guys, I've been right a lot. And guess what? People want to know what's going to happen. And so they're going to watch somebody who gives them an accurate viewpoint on what's going to happen. It's literally that simple. You haven't at all? Okay. All right. Okay. You mostly are? Yes, I have a good track record. And one of those, chill, bro, chill your ego. Oh, it's not ego at all. Like, I know that we have like people like that do this. You're like a streamer hater. Like, I function media autistic. Why would I spend money on a streamer? I'm not some kind of a cuck. It's just weird guy, boohoo metrics. Yeah, just weird like streamer hater. Like, oh, I don't like streamers. Listen, if you hate your job, that's fine. But like, I don't want to hear about it. Anyway, it's other logical people. Yeah, it's just like weird. Like, it's like that kind of like old school Twitch viewer, right? Like salty, weird. Like, I hate streamers, Twitch viewers, but I spend all day watching them. Anyway, so I think that it's not ego. It's just the fact. Like, I have no problem saying when I'm wrong. And I think that, you know, recently there's been a pretty big example of that. So I have been wrong about things before, but I think I've also been right about a lot of things too. And so people are going to watch the content because they think that it's accurate. You have no idea about David Pakman. I don't know if you mean in general, but he's not the guy you think he is. Well, let me go ahead and let me look and see what you're saying. What am I not understanding? But also for a lot of people it is. He's not doing what you're saying. And what am I saying he's doing? In fact, it's not delusional lefty, to be honest. That's not the point. He said Trump would lose. No, I didn't. I said that a lot of people said that, and I think people in media said that. I never said that he explicitly said that. So, yeah, that's it. And basically, I never said that. What I did say is that, and I started off by saying people don't want to watch somebody who is losing. That's a big reason. Also, he categorized himself as left-wing, right? It's not that I did, it's that he did. He literally said. That's not why. Yeah. Again, you insinuated it? Of course. Yeah, I mean, it's a possibility. There's like 10 different reasons.
Risk. It terrifies me because our instinct is the opposite of what the right does, and we will get crushed if this is the way we respond to a defeat. The right wants us not to exist. The right wants to decimate independent progressive media. And so when
Well, I think that's not accurate, and I think that is kind of accurate, but it's not complete. I think that left-wing people constantly go after media. Like, look at the amount of people that are trying to shut down Twitter's advertising and trying to make people not advertise on certain platforms because the platforms have certain positions that are problematic. I think this exactly happens. It happens with everybody. Everybody does that.
Lose 5,000 subscribers, and Brian loses thousands, and Ring of Fire loses thousands, and everybody's losing thousands of subscribers. Understand that when the right loses, they get organized, they fund, and they create insanely effective organizations like Turning Point USA, investing in the Daily Wire and building out this huge network of right-wing ideas and influencers. So if you're feeling burnt out, I encourage you, take a break until the inauguration. It's months, okay? Mental health break, do it. But when we start canceling the subscription...
I think that another big reason why is that this is going to be probably something like, I don't really have like a... I don't have any data for this, so it's like 100% like a vibe check. I think that a lot of people follow and have left-wing ideas because they think that they're popular and for optics reasons. That's why, for example, like there's guys that try to act like they're more liberal or more woke than they are in order to hook up with girls. So if the position is that I'm going to try to have this viewpoint or I'm going to try to think like this, and then it's not popular, and it's not giving them the result that they want, they're going to stop having that opinion because they never actually had that opinion in the first place. They only had that opinion as basically as a social tool. And I think that's a very big component. It's always consistent to look better than everyone else. Yeah, exactly. And so I think that for them, optics matter more. And whenever they see that the optics are not in their favor, they roach out, because they don't really have a lot of these opinions in the first place, or they're not very strong or established. So as soon as they get confronted or challenged, they immediately stop having them. I think also younger people are more idealistic. Your politics tend to be. Yeah, I think that's true too. And so like, yeah, younger people might be really idealistic. They see it not go their way, and then they get disillusioned. Yeah, I think that's extremely common. Out of fear of being attacked for wrong, I think. Yeah, exactly. Such a black and white perspective on everything. Well, no, what I'm saying is that there's like a lot of different components and reasons why somebody would do something. So like, I think that like I've pretty much gone over a lot of them, where like, I think that one of the reasons is because they're pushing a message that's not popular. And because it's not popular, people leave because they want to be on the winning team. I think that in other cases, it's because they were saying that one thing was going to happen and then it didn't happen. I think that's another thing. And then the third thing is that the optics of being part of a group of people that you were actually only part of because it was socially advantageous. And then when you see that group not have that social advantage, well, then you leave because it was never about the group. It was about the advantage. So there's a lot of things that come together, and it's not one component. There are a lot of components to it. And so, no, I don't think it's one-dimensional at all. I think that I've tried to explain that.
We are in an algorithmic desubscription spiral right now.
Yeah.
Because when people start unsubscribing on YouTube, YouTube thinks, oh, we probably shouldn't recommend this content because it's generating a lot of unsubscribes. So then the content doesn't get recommended. And then the message doesn't get out. And then next election, they win by even more. So I do understand the instinct, but if we cede ground to them, they crush us everywhere. Now, we're up against a MAGA Supreme Court potentially till 2050. We'll talk about that later. We're up against a completely uninhibited Trump. I actually have an entire chapter in my forthcoming book, The Echo Machine, about exactly this. It's the introduction. In the introduction, I explain how it's disgusting to me that when you engage in politics, you can't just find solutions. First, you've got to convince people climate change is even happening. You can't just find solutions because half the country doesn't even accept the science of vaccines. I outline this in the introduction.
Well, I think that they don't accept the science because they don't know what it is. It's an education problem. And yeah, obviously you have to convince somebody that a problem is real in order for them to want to fix the problem. I think that's logical, right?
But I also make the point in the book that if you actually care about the world for ourselves, children, grandchildren, other people, families, friends, people we care about, when you disengage because they've gotten so extreme, you cede ground to them and you say, do whatever you want. I'm disengaging, do whatever you want.
Sure.
And we really can't do that, okay? So my request to you today is, please resubscribe to the YouTube channel.
Of course. And so I think this is what happens with a lot of groups of people like this. The issue is that people don't want to be part of a group that is losing. And so there's like other components where like some people are angry because, and I'm not saying David Pakman said this, and I never did say that, but there were a lot of like left-leaning people, and I think this is especially true in mainstream media, that thought this was going to be a clean sweep, or they thought that Kamala Harris was going to win, etc. And that happened, and guess what? It didn't happen, and guess what? All of those people now are like, well, we're not going to trust you anymore because you were fucking lying. That's the reason why. It's funny he thinks he's going to win the subs back by gaslighting his own public. I think that people just want to be on the winning side. That's literally it.
Contributes to the high housing prices. Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. First, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family.
Yeah.
We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the Vice President is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back.
I didn't even know
you're
that.
You're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in. And we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find.
This is a good point he's making here.
But we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens? If you lower energy prices, as Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill, one of the biggest drivers of housing costs aside from illegal immigration is, think about it, if a truck driver's paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods, too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where, Governor, we will get to you in a moment. But, Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is letting in
Well, of course, that's not true. And again, you have the facts. I guess we agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like, there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor, your time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that in some cases, many of those are local. Many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal. But I think whenever we
That's a huge problem. I wish they would talk about that more.
Get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. Look, it's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. You think about health care. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done, but when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do, but I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better health care policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley.
I was there.
3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand
3,000 years ago.
It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, More people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to. Go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept, because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened, and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight, is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher. And he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works.
It's not that. That's not what they asked.
About this of young people, or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then what happens is...
So you think the individual mandate's a good idea?
You shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there.
The mandate was the bad part.
When we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying health care once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret?
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of time. We have a number of subjects to discuss. Margaret?
Let's talk about families in America. There is a child care crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you've said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns?
That's a great question.
2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family medical leave. One is, I think they're moral, and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family medical leave. You have a child, you and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start, the family works better, we stay in their employers, we get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota, and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue, those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some places, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family and medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn?
They're not going to give an answer.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who is an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. But being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company. But the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of child care model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with child care. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide child care in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote child care because, look, it is unacceptable. And, you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also said, Senator Vance, many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on child care as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this.
It's a lot of
Trump
money.
recently said, as much as child care is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families. Cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic
He does
proposal.
say it weird.
And I think what President Trump is saying
Yeah,
is that
he
when we
does.
bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, child care options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the child care shortage?
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the child care shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families. Because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's $5,000 or $6,000, that plays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this.
Not enough.
Because
Yeah,
we got
he's right.
out of an imbalance
That's a
on
good
this.
point.
We thought we were going to get by not paying people.
Yeah.
I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, if those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with child care and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy's growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results.
Oh, yeah.
Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud.
Stop the steal.
Of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies.
Good, because the past was
make
fucking
housing
retarded.
affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that
shit was
there were
so
problems
stupid.
in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president, Donald Trump left the White House, and now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues, and that to me is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here, and I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this, and the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day, some with the American flag. Several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision.
String them up.
Senator,
I remember that.
Adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Right.
Margaret?
No, I agree with him.
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
True.
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that
he's right about this too,
the results of the election, I'm on board.
Yeah.
But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand
Democrats
how
started
we got
it,
to
but
this point.
Trump made it way worse.
The issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance. I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement. But this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't wear masks.
Senator, the governor does have the floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
I totally agree with Vance on this, by the way. I think he's totally right.
Well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is, where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So, America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
It is now time for the closing statement. Senator Vance won the virtual coin toss and elected to go last. So, Governor Walz, you are first. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Senator Vance. Thank you to CBS News. And most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are
Since when is an endorsement from Dick Cheney a good thing?
They believe in a positive future of this country, and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage, and then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl, and that too has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Nora O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until Election Day. Please get out and vote. And for all of us here at CBS News, thank you and good night.
A handshake, and that's the end. Tim Walz, J.D. Vance squaring off for about 90 minutes in the heart of Midtown Manhattan, the CBS News studios, as their families come out to greet them after what was really a quite civilized debate. And I mean,
that was a shock. I'm gonna be honest, like, that's been crazy. Like, we haven't had a debate like this since like Romney and fucking Obama. It's been a long time. Yeah, it's like honestly kind of shocking. That's crazy.
But it was earnest. And
that was nuts. Like, what the fuck? Like, yeah, like I didn't even know what to think. Like, I was like surprised. I was like, because you know how it's been, right? It's been crazy. And like, you know, there was no talk of horse cum. There's no couch fucking or anything like that. It was a very civil and refreshing debate, and I think it was great. I do. I think it went so much better than a presidential debate. And I'd say after that debate, I'd be more willing to vote for either of them than either of Kamala or Trump. To be totally honest, like, I very, very easily, I would rather vote for both of them than either one of the candidates for president. Vance did a great job. Yeah, I think he did. I think he did a really good job. There's a couple of things, like, I think that there's like a Cold War that's going on with, like, you know, Democrats not acknowledging censorship and Republicans not acknowledging that they lost the 2020 election. I don't like that. I think that really both things are true, and it's a disservice to everybody that we can't act like both things happened. But overall, I think it did pretty well. We don't care. Yeah. I mean, that's the way I see it, right? And Vance won the 3v1. I think that Vance came out looking better than Tim Walz. I do think so. But I think that's also another reason because a lot of people had a more negative opinion of Vance. And I think that he repaired that image better than I would say Tim Walz did. I think Tim Walz, like, pretty much did, like, he did fine. Really, poll? You guys want a poll? Yeah, that's fine. And don't listen to me. Like, I'll do a poll and you guys can vote in it. Who do you think came out ahead or improved your opinion of them? Okay, and we've got the poll. Let me go ahead and link it to you guys, and then we'll take a look at the results. A lot of people are saying both. I think that makes sense. Yeah, a lot of people pretty much JD Vance.
I want to begin tonight with the issue that voters repeatedly say is their number one issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago, and your opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle-class kid. And I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing. And the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year.
I never heard of that.
Because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because it was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look,
no inflation.
We've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago.
Oh,
this
man,
has been
she doesn't
a
like
disaster
that.
for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums.
I've heard this one before.
And they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon.
Oh,
and you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently.
Oh, God.
These are the people that she and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality, and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression.
Well, because of
Donald
COVID.
Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
That was
and
a good
what we
one.
have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name-calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of
nervous.
bringing
She does
us
sound
together.
nervous,
We
doesn't
have
she?
so much more in common than what separates us, and I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic, and the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounced back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
He knows it.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse, mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
That's just a soundbite. They gave her that to say. Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors,
just a soundbite.
think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Oh, my God.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this. Because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation.
That's a good point.
They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response. And you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century.
What's she talking
which
about?
means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything
he's got her talking with no mic on.
4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly,
is more entertaining than I thought it was going to be.
I believe 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay.
You'd
I
have
want
to
to turn
say
to the
it.
issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban, because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, is doing an excellent job, but the governor before, he said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says
she's talking
execution
again, bro.
after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born is okay. And that's not okay with me. hence the vote.
This is
But what
gonna
I
be
did is something for
be
52
for an hour
years.
and a half?
They've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength
He's a masturbator.
of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions. Very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life.
Nope.
Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime, a violation to their body, does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms,
was cooking
in
too.
particular the
She
freedom to make
was.
decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible.
Oh.
The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came to your
Well, I won't
desk?
have to because, again, 2 things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then her, I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea.
Oh, man.
And how unfair that would have been. Part of the reason they lost to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free. But they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. Well, wonderful. Let's go to Congress. Do it. But the fact is that for years, they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, I want to give you your time to respond. But I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans
not even looking
believe
at
in
her,
a
bro.
woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
Excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer
That's the
question?
problem.
Would you
because
veto?
under Roe v.
Answer
Wade,
the question.
you
Here we go.
could
Yes.
do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside, and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security.
Oh,
We know
bro,
it's an
he
issue
gets
that's
the
important to
final word on
Republicans,
that?
Democrats, voters across the board
Oh,
in
my
this country.
God.
Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions.
Here we
know
go.
the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem.
That's a good one.
And understand,
that's a good one.
This comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
Oh, God.
And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first, and I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I'd like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so, that would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border?
First, let me respond as to the rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is
the people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
television. But the people on television saying their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
We'll find out.
Talk about extreme. You know, this is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the Republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people who's were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody
That's
has
probably
ever
the best
seen.
response you could
So
have.
when somebody does a bad job, I fire him.
Yeah.
And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they? But they have done such a poor job. And they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in. And all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But Vice
Excuse me,
President Harris,
the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud. Just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
3v1. Thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich, coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn the page on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fauna Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York, every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies.
Terminate the Constitution.
Expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation that went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president, you said you wanted to ban fracking. Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs for assault weapons. Now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking, because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking as Vice President of the United States. And in fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work, to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams. My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down and name-calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your response?
First of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction.
Half.
And I built it into many billions of dollars.
It was only $200 million.
Billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised.
Yeah.
So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police. She's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out.
There
Wait a
we
minute.
go.
I'm talking now. If you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis. She went out and raised money to get them out of jail.
Fucking
She
God.
did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this.
Shit.
She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish one thing, so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. They took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead, fossil fuel will be dead, we'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out of it. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get
environment
to.
that
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar, remember that. She was the border czar.
He said it.
She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America, they're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world, and crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when
ask
are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle, they went into Seattle, they took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
Yeah, David.
But let me just ask
you. You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes or no?
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, you know, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate. And what did the president then at the time say?
We're really going to do
there
this?
There were fine people on each side.
Oh, my God.
Let's remember that when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the president said, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking. Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this. You talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The President of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal.
Oh, God.
If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
Yeah, I said that.
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
That.
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it.
Oh, my
and
God.
they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls, and we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them Republican.
No judge looked at it.
And said
they
there was
said
no
we didn't have standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter, because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election.
He still thinks that shit was
President
fake.
Biden and yourself.
Yeah.
But I do want to ask you about something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did, in fact, lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart, Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way.
Man.
He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president, but when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes, and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But he got 14 million votes. They threw him out.
He hates her.
She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I think we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris,
I can't believe he got the final word on that
Israel has a right
again.
to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how.
Oh, my
saying
God.
International humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
He says that's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear. They can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it, because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way, gets paid a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the National Constitution Center right here in Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
Man. All right, yo, bye.
And Lindsay Davis.
Welcome back to this historic ABC News presidential debate tonight. We're going to continue here, and I want to.
We can hear it. Yeah, my dad said that he thought that she did way better at the beginning.
President, it has been the position of the
or so far
that we must defend.
That's what he said
from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy. That it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being uselessly, people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for $250 billion or more because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left. I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if he's... Where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
here... They threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. President,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war?
Yes or no? I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on support for Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, How would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky
a few
days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch.
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight. Afghanistan came up in the last hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier, and please, I'll give you a minute here.
Putin would be sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin, and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is Commander-in-Chief, and the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time,
There we go.
to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you. Otherwise, we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not, again, appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So, if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, you know, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, it was we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine, because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black.
Here we go.
I want to ask a bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. you make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words, so I'm
I
asking.
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual who took out a full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5. Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this.
Yeah, no, all that happened.
Want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
Oh, here we go.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up, Lindsay.
I want to respond to that, though. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country, one who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's compare the plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life to help you in that most critical stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name-calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's
Trump,
turn back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on.
No.
President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She
please.
has a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
Thank you,
That's
Mr.
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
President
because
Trump,
the
President
former
Trump.
president has
No,
said
I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry. We're
here
going
we go.
to move on, Vice
One
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this is
multiple
now
times.
your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act,
Oh, my
also
God.
known as Obamacare. You have failed to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare, quote, unless we can do something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones,
my
too. And so do they.
God.
They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not-too-distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private health care options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times.
Jesus.
I was a senator at the time. When I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate, and the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said, at the time because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, As I've been vice president, and we, over the last 4 years, have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it,
Vice
pass his
President
prologue
Harris, thank
in terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot
She made a mistake. Number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to that's important for a number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable. But we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
Oh, here we go.
Welcome back tonight. The time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris,
all right, here we go.
begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past. and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it, and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack, we're not going to take fossil fuel, we're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world, and from all of us here at ABC News. Good night.
There he is.
Mr. President, we so appreciate you giving us an hour of your time. I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room, sir. A lot of people did not think it was appropriate for you to be here today. You have pushed false claims about some of your rivals.
Jesus, bro, like, oh boy.
From Nikki Haley to former President Barack Obama, saying that they were not born in the United States, which is not true.
Yeah.
You have told 4 congresswomen of color who were American citizens to go back to where they came from. You have used words like animal and rabid to describe black district attorneys.
Oh my God.
Attack black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist. You've had dinner with a white supremacist at your Mar-a-Lago resort. So my question, sir, now that you are asking black supporters to vote for you, why should black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
Do you want to know what I think is probably really funny about this? I bet Trump probably likes these interviews more than the bullshit ones. I bet he probably does. Yeah, he gets to fight. Yeah, absolutely. I think so.
First of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network. And I think it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit. I love the black population of this country. I've done so much for the black population of this country.
Oh, man.
Including employment, including opportunity zones with Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina, which is one of the greatest programs ever for black workers and black entrepreneurs. I've done so much, and, you know, and I say this, historically black colleges and universities were out of money. They were stone cold broke, and I saved them, and I gave them long-term financing, and nobody else was doing it. I think it's a very rude introduction. I don't know exactly why you would do something like that. And let me go a step further. I was invited here, and I was told my opponent, whether it was Biden or Kamala, I was told my opponent was going to be here. It turned out my opponent isn't here. You invited me under false pretense. And then you said, you can't do it with Zoom. Well, you know, where's Zoom? She's going to do it with Zoom, and she's not coming. And then you were half an hour late, just so we understand. I have two.
Holy shit. Oh my fucking God. He's so mad, yes.
Much respect for you to be late. They couldn't get
I'm going to be honest. At the beginning of this, I was like, ah, shit, this is probably going to see some boring video. No.
Equipment working or something
Mr.
was
President,
wrong.
I would love
I think
if you
it's
can
a
answer the
very
question
nasty
on your
question.
rhetoric and why you
I
believe
have
that
answered the
black voters
question.
should trust you with another
I
4
have
years.
been the best president for the black population since Abraham Lincoln.
Better
That's
than
my
Jesus.
answer.
Better than President Johnson, who signed the Voting Rights Act?
And for you to start off a question and answer period, especially when you're 35 minutes late because you couldn't get your equipment to work in such a hostile manner, I think it's a disgrace.
Let me just ask a follow-up, sir, and then we'll move on to other questions here. Some of your own supporters, including Republicans on Capitol Hill, have labeled Vice President Kamala Harris, who is the first black and Asian American woman to serve as vice president and be on a major party ticket, as a DEI hire. Is that acceptable language to you? And will you tell those Republicans and those supporters to stop it?
How do you define DEI? Go ahead.
Doesn't even know what it is. And by the way, you know who else called Kamala Harris a DEI hire? Joe Biden. He literally has said it. I've heard him say it.
How do you define
diversity, equity, inclusion?
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Is that what your definition?
That is
give me a
literally
definition
the words
then. Would you give me a definition of that? Give me a definition of that.
Sir, I'm asking you a question,
No,
a
you
very
have to
direct
define
question.
it. Define
Jesus Christ. I actually think Trump is really good at, because I'm the kind of person that if somebody asks me a question, I try to answer their question honestly. Trump's not that kind of person. And he just, if you ask him a question, he'll just completely flip the fucking script. He sidestepped it. Yes. I think this is actually very, there's a lot to learn from this, I think. Because I feel like this is very effective communication. Not that it's good, but it's very effective.
Define it for me if you would.
I just defined it, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I can say, no, I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much. And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black.
Oh my fucking God. Oh my God. Bro, entertainment at its finest, bro. This is nuts.
So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She has always
But you know
identified
what?
as a black woman.
I
She went to a
respect
historically
either
black
one.
college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't. Because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person.
Just be clear, sir, do you believe
I
that
think
she is
somebody should look into that too when you ask continue in a very hostile, nasty tone.
It's a direct question, sir. Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is a DEI hire, as some
I
Republicans
really don't
have
know.
said?
I mean, I really don't know. Could be. There are some, and there are plenty. I know this lady right over there, Harris, is a fantastic person who just interviewed me at length, and we had a great interview, I think, and I heard you got very good ratings on that interview.
You told me it was a...
He's trying to win somebody else over on the stage, so then they'll be more favorable towards him to make her look oh my God, bro, this guy. Oh God. Jesus Christ.
Longest one of your life, so we had a good discussion. Look, I want to talk about why you're here today. I mean, it is not lost on us how divided we are as a country. And as you were coming today, we really got to see that we are divided along the lines of race, along the lines of gender. And there is this question of...
World-class agro management? Yeah, it worked. That's the thing. See, this is... It's crazy that it actually ends up working. He's good at this? Yes.
This moment where we are, why come here? What is your message today?
My message is to stop people from invading our country that are taking, frankly, a lot of problems with it. But one of the big problems, and a lot of the journalists in this room I know and I have great respect for, a lot of the journalists in this room are black. I will tell you that coming from the border are millions and millions of people that happen to be taking black jobs.
Bro, he doubled down on it. Oh my God, this was the thing, bro. Like, oh my God, they took a job. Damn.
Had the best.
What exactly is a black job, sir?
A black job is anybody that has a job. That's what it is. Anybody that has a job.
All right.
And
Mr.
they're taking the employment away from black people. They're coming in, they're invading. It's an invasion of millions of people, probably 15, 16, 17 million people. I have a feeling it's much more than that. And everybody's been seeing what's happened. The first group of people, the black population, is affected most by that. And Kamala is allowing it to happen. She's the border czar. She's the worst border czar in the history of the world. There's never been a border czar like this. She's never even essentially been. She said she was there once, but not the right part of the border. So she was a border czar. She's done a horrible job. These people are coming into our country, and they're taking black jobs and Hispanic jobs, and frankly, they're taking union jobs. Unions are being very badly affected by all of the...
People say Trump's performance is horrible. I disagree. I think that he's like a bull in a china shop. All of the things that you're not supposed to say, the things you're not supposed to do, he's literally saying, fuck it. People took what he said with like the black jobs and they said this is racist, and he goes back and repeats it to 3 black women on stage in front of an audience of people he just said was black. Yeah, no, I actually think the messaging is very good. Absolutely it is.
Millions of people that are pouring into our country.
And the reason why, it's not because of what he's saying. It's the fact that he's saying it confidently in a position that it would be uncomfortable. And I think that goes very far. People will respect that.
One thing, as we discussed, many of these people are coming in from mental institutions, from prisons, from jails. They're gang members in other countries. Other countries are setting loose their prisoners. They're opening up their prisons and their mental institutions, and they're taking their bad people, drug dealers, gang members, and they're bringing them into the United States.
No,
and by the way, their crime rate is going down, and our crime rate is going to be a disaster.
Mr. President, I want to get into how you address some of the issues with black communities. And I say that plural because we live in communities of color that are different. We're not all the same. We don't vote the same. We don't think the same.
Sure.
It's not monolithic. So as you come here today, I want to talk about something that bursts, and this is the weight of the inflation on this country right now.
Some people are confused with the Mr. President. This is something I've mentioned before. I think a lot of people that aren't familiar maybe with like U.S. decorum wouldn't know this, and there's like really no reason to know this. But it's actually proper courtesy to refer to even somebody who has been a president but not currently a president as the president, or President Trump, right? President Kennedy, President Eisenhower. So yeah, that's the decorum. So it's not like, what I'm saying is that QAnon isn't actually right. Trump isn't actually running the country, and she didn't accidentally misspeak because all the journalists are in on this, and Biden is actually in a Hollywood studio, and Trump has been running it the whole time. That's actually not what's happening. This wasn't some misspeak or something like that.
The nonprofit Money Management International recently released data from its mid-year analysis that we have found a 52% rise in people who are seeking counseling for being in credit debt. They're paying for food that is sky high on their credit cards, and now they can't pay that off. The credit counseling nonprofit MMI, as I said, is saying now that they've seen surges that they haven't seen since we were in a pandemic of people in financial trouble. Much of that falls on the shoulders of single moms, single black moms, when you look statistically. Yeah. How do you turn it around? What's your plan for the black community when it comes to money?
So, first of all, it's very hard to hear you for whatever reason because of the fact that they have bad equipment, because I guess, you know, this woman was unable to get the right equipment. But it's very hard for me to hear you, but I can hear every other word. It's very difficult, actually. But so I don't know if they can fix it or do something with it, but I'll do the best I can with it. The inflation is absolutely destroying our middle class, our working class, virtually every class. Inflation is a disaster in our country. Inflation is a country buster. It breaks every country. And we had, in my opinion, the worst inflation we've had. They say it's 58 years, but I think it's much more than that. It's been devastating. And if you just take a look at a lot of things they don't include, like interest rates. Interest rates went from 2.4% to 10%, and you can't get the money. People can't buy houses. They no longer have the American dream. Young people, young black people, they don't have the American dream anymore. They can't buy a house. They can't borrow the money because of the cost of the money. They can't buy it because of the cost of housing, because of the cost to build it, because of inflation. Inflation is a disaster, and it's destroying our country, and it's destroying the black community probably as much or more.
So what do you do?
Than any
What's your plan?
You know what we have to do? We have to bring down the cost of energy, and that's going to bring down the cost of inflation. This was all started with a bad energy policy by Joe Biden. By the way, just if I might, I was running against a man named Biden. You probably saw that. And he was losing very badly in the polls, and then he had a rather bad debate. I would say it was a bad debate. I would say it was one of the worst debates in history.
It's crazy that, like, there are, like, the ways that he talks, and it's so fucking funny to me, man.
And his poll numbers crashed. And instead of saying, you know, let's keep going, and maybe something happens the other way, they said, oh, we're going to replace him. Let's just replace him. That's like you're in a fight, a prize fighter's in a fight. He's not doing well. You say, let's bring in another fighter. So our whole campaign was steered toward him. Now we have to steer it to right. But ultimately, it's the same because they have bad policy. They have policies of open borders, unbelievable open borders, horrible energy policies. They want to get rid of, as you say, gasoline in cars. They want to get rid of oil. They want to get rid of efficient.
Somebody says, I don't find this funny. It's a stupid man talking and it's a fascist talking at the same time. You need to stop caring about what happens. Let it go. Just let it go. Completely disconnect from this. Stop giving a fuck. Stop getting emotionally attached to this. Try to just sit back and enjoy the show. And you can vote for how you feel. But the moment that you let it emotionally affect you is the moment that it controls you. And you're not going to be any better off for that than if you didn't do it.
Heating,
Mr. President.
environmentally, what they're doing is killing our country. They're absolutely destroying our country. But the inflation is the thing that's hurting the black worker, the black population, and every other population within our country. Inflation is the worst it's been, I think, in over 100 years. And they'll fact check it. They'll say it's only 58. Whatever it may be, they don't add all the numbers. They don't add the really bad numbers, and you can check that too. But inflation, Harris, is absolutely destroying this country and the people in our country. Yes,
Mr. President, can I ask you another question that is also impacting black Americans?
And that's very clear now. Good.
Bro, she just sitting there? Jesus, man. God damn. Just fuming? I know.
It's very clear. I hear you.
Okay. So Sonia Massey, someone from Illinois, an unarmed black woman, was shot the other day in her home by a deputy sheriff. The deputy has since been charged with murder.
Good.
You've said police would get immunity from prosecution if you win. Why should someone like that officer...
This is actually a great fucking question, and Trump definitely needs to answer this shit, because cops do shit wrong. And, like, I hate how it's this fucking all or nothing thing. Yeah, no, she's right. He's fucking wrong about this.
Have immunity, in your opinion?
Yeah.
Immunity?
Great question.
Immunity.
I don't know the exact case, but I saw something, and it didn't look good to me. It didn't look good to me. Are you talking with the water, right?
Yeah, well, police unions are not backing this person either. Okay. But again, why would...
They're going to be charging the officer. I guess they're charging the officer.
So why should he receive immunity?
Well, he might not. I mean, it depends. It depends on what happens. I'm talking about people that are much different cases than that. We need people to protect ourselves. And by the way, in Chicago, as an example, a few weeks ago, July 4th weekend, they had 117 shootings and 17 deaths. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. We need to have our police officers have the respect and dignity back. In this particular case, I saw something that didn't look good to me. I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all.
So, can you get a little more specific back to the immunity question?
Thank you. Pressing him on this. What a horrible answer.
Who would make those distinctions?
Well, right now, for the most part, people are protected by their unions, by their police unions, or by their police departments. But I'm saying if I felt, or if a group of people would feel that somebody was being unfairly prosecuted because the person did a good job maybe with crime, or made a mistake, an innocent mistake. There's a big difference between being a bad person and making an innocent mistake. But if somebody made an innocent mistake, I would want to help that person.
What would those exceptions be? What would determine an innocent mistake?
You go after somebody, and it's a very close call, and it's very dangerous. And you know, they have the policeman's life and woman is a very difficult thing, because sometimes you have less than a second to make a life and death decision. And sometimes very bad decisions are made. They're not made from an evil standpoint, but they're made from the standpoint of they made a mistake.
So I want to follow up really quickly.
You know, I find it interesting because you do talk about reining in prosecutors, especially when it comes to prosecutors that are prosecuting you. Why doesn't that skepticism apply to law enforcement?
Well, I've been prosecuted because I'm a political opponent of two people that have weaponized our justice system. I've been prosecuted. I just won the big case in Florida. Everyone said that was the biggest case. That was the most difficult case. And I just won it. Now, Biden has a similar case, except much worse. I was protected under the Presidential Records Act. Biden wasn't, because he wasn't president at the time. And he had 50 years worth of documents. And they ruled that he was incompetent, and therefore he...
I think that he's not giving a good answer to this. I think the only part of the answer that was good was the component about how police officers have a short time to make a decision, and sometimes it's not it's a bad decision, but it wasn't done maliciously. I think that point was good, but everything before and after that was dog shit. Yeah, I do.
Shouldn't stand trial. And I said, isn't that something? He's incompetent and he can't stand trial, and yet he can be president. Isn't that nice?
Mr. President,
but they released him on the basis that he was incompetent. They said he had no memory, and he was a nice old guy, but he had no memory, and therefore we're not going to prosecute him. I won the case, and it got very little publicity. I didn't notice ABC doing any publicity on it, George.
We cover you extensively, sir. I'd love to move over on to
I
different
didn't notice you do any publicity on it at all. I won the case, the biggest case. This is an attack on a political opponent. I have another one.
Probably the biggest attack. Definitely the
for a
biggest
limited time,
attack.
sir. I'd love to move on to different
No,
topics.
excuse you. You're the one that held me up for 35 minutes, just so you understand.
Oh my God.
If we can move on now to the state of the race, sir, I want to get back to the campaign. Senator J.D. Vance is your running mate.
Yeah.
He's had a lot of controversy lately, and I want to read you a few things that he has said in the past.
Okay, let's see.
He said the Democrats running the country are a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices they've made. And so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. He's not talking here about how great it is to be a parent. He's attacking what he says are the choices people are making to not have children.
Oh my God!
Did you know that he had these views about people who do not have children before you picked him to be your running mate? And do you agree with him?
No, I know this. He is very family oriented, and he thinks family is a great thing. That doesn't mean he thinks that if you don't have a family, it's not. I know people with families. I know people with great families. I know people with very troubled families. And I also know people with no families. They didn't meet the right person. Things happen. You go through life, you don't meet the right person.
But he's not just talking about families here. He also says that people that don't have children should get less votes than those that do.
I'm just speaking for myself.
Is that your campaign
I think I'm speaking for him, too. He strongly believes in family. But I know people with great families. I know people with not great families that don't have a family. And the people without the family are far better. They're superior in many cases, okay? He's not saying they're not. What he's saying is that he thinks the family experience is a very important thing. It's a very good thing. But that doesn't mean that if you grow up and you grow older and you don't meet somebody that would be wonderful to meet and would have been good, that that's a bad thing. He's not saying that. My interpretation, you'll have to ask him, actually, but my interpretation is he's strongly family-oriented, but that doesn't mean if you don't have a family.
Here's the reality, is when he said that it's a bunch of childless cat ladies who want to make everybody as miserable as they are, he can't say that this is true. But
there's something wrong with it.
Just one last point, and then we'll move on.
To be fair, I think this is a good answer by Trump. Like, this is a very, very good answer. It's unfortunate that all the good answers are about the things that don't matter, and all the bad answers are about the things that do matter.
One of the bedrock
problematic
of American life is one person, one vote. Senator J.D. Vance has suggested that someone who has children should have more votes than a person who does not have children. I just want to be clear here. Is that the position of your campaign?
Well, no, but it's not something I have ever heard before. I can tell you this. Right now you have illegal aliens coming into our country.
There it is. There it is.
Many from prisons and many from mental institutions, and they want to give them votes. I don't think they should have votes. They came into our country illegally, and they're taking the vote away from all of the people in this room that have been here a long time, that have worked hard, that in many cases, and you'll see this happening, if I'm not elected, you're going to see it happen. If I am, you're not going to have any problem. But you're going to see it happening a long time. You're going to see the people in this room people outside of this room are going to be losing their jobs to people that have come into this country illegally.
Mr. President, can we stay with just kind of the state of the race right now? Because I felt like that vice president question, candidate question was right in there with that. So let's talk about J.D. Vance for a little bit. He's had some stumbles out of the gate. I don't know if you're hearing what we hear as reporters, but it's been a tough couple of weeks for him. Why did you choose J.D. Vance?
Why are people saying that J.D. Vance was having sex with sofas? Where did this come from? Because I've never seen him say this. It was in his book. It's a lie. Like, they lie about you. Like, because I don't think that, like, I think that there's a chance he could have done it, but I don't think there's a chance that he would have said he did it. So how will we know? There's no way. Who the fuck goes out and says this as a politician? Yeah, I fucked a couch. How does this come up? First editions had it printed. The second edition removed the admission. Man, I wonder what actually happened. I don't know. Yeah, because this is an important topic.
Why
did you choose him? And I'm having a hard time hearing too.
I chose him
everybody out there can, but it's
I'll
hard
tell
to
you
hear.
why. I chose him because he's a very strong believer in work and the working man and woman, and especially the working man and woman who have been treated very unfairly, because you have many of them in this room. But you have many of those people, they were treated very unfairly. They worked very hard and they were treated unfairly. He wrote the book that became a bestseller. The movie became a smash hit. He's a very smart guy without the benefit of having a family that has contacts, like a father that was well connected. He got into Yale Law School. He graduated in 2 years from Ohio State, summa cum laude. I mean, you take a look at, his career has been an amazing career. He started off at a level with a difficult family situation, very difficult, with the mother and the father and everything else. He ends up going to Yale Law School and was one of the top students, became the head of the Law Journal. I mean, that's an amazing thing. He's a 4-year, he was in the military with great distinction for 4 years, got out, went into business, became successful in business, very successful in business, actually, did public offerings and other things. And I have to believe in that. I mean, he's somebody that was born in a rough situation. Most of the people know that situation because it was very well documented in his book. And I have a lot of respect for somebody that can get into Yale and become one of the best students in Yale, that meets a young woman at Yale who was also outstanding, and they get married, they have a beautiful family, but he had he's made himself an amazing life. He then goes to Ohio, lives in Ohio, and he had my endorsement. That helped. But he wins the Senate. He becomes a United States Senator. So he's a United States Senator.
Bro, like, I have to say that, do you know who really hopes Trump is going to win? Every fucking media company. This guy is just... I mean, this is pure fucking... This is crazy. Endless content. Yes. It's insane.
So Harris, like I respect you for your success, I respect people for their success.
The reason I asked the question is because the last time you and I sat and talked was the day that you were shot. We'd been together for much of that day. You left to go to Butler, Pennsylvania, and we didn't know what was next.
Yeah.
And 2 days after that,
I cannot understand your microphone.
I know
is so
it is really hard for me to understand
it's just,
you too.
I can understand you perfectly.
Because she's closer.
So he's trying to get her to move, I bet.
I can understand you.
Happy to hear that, sir.
But I can't
Really happy to hear
understand,
that.
Harris.
I have a few more questions.
Because of the distance, and the mics are really in lousy shape, but I cannot understand
Are
you asking a question?
what you're saying.
So what I wanted to say was the last time we spoke, you said some words that were prophetic because I asked you who you wanted to choose for vice president.
Yeah.
And you said normally it really wouldn't matter what they would bring, you know, you choose somebody that you think has a future, that sort of thing. But you said these words 3.5 hours before an attempted assassination on your life. You told me that bad things happen, Harris. And that's why this decision is important this time. Bad things happen. You said it twice. When you look at J.D. Vance, is he ready on day one?
Does he what?
Ready on day one, if he has to be.
I've always had...
That's a great fucking question. That's a great way to phrase the question. That's so good.
Great respect for him. And for the other candidates, too. But I will say this, and I think this is well documented. Historically, the vice president, in terms of the election, does not have any impact. I mean, virtually no impact. You have 2 or 3 days where there's a lot of commotion as to who, like you're having it on the Democrat side.
I don't really agree with that. I think that, for example, having Biden on the Obama ticket, like, it definitely kind of, like, made voters like, oh, okay, it's going to be fine. Like, it's basically, like, if you have, like, a kind of out there candidate, and we'll get to Palin, right? That's the other side. If you have an out there candidate, sometimes having a vice president that kind of like, I feel like basically what ends up happening is that the vice president compliments the president in the way that the president is not. So like if the president is extreme, then the vice president is non-extreme. If the president is non-extreme, then the vice president is extreme for more extreme votes, right? So you have somebody like Sarah Palin, like that affected John McCain massively. I think it did. Then you had Kamala Harris, right? Obviously, Joe Biden is like the traditional super establishment. They bring on Kamala Harris, comparatively much younger, and also like a minority and a woman. And so that brings in that group of people that may feel alienated from just a Biden ticket, right? So yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, and also Trump, like Vance is 39. I think this is absolutely a point. Again, complimenting Trump because Trump is 78.
It's going to be, and then that dies down, and it's all about the presidential pick. Virtually never has it mattered.
Vivek would have been better. I agree. I think J.D. Vance has said a lot of really funny things that I agree with, but I think that in all circumstances and in all cases, picking Vivek would have been a better option, and it was a mistake not to do it.
Maybe Lyndon Johnson mattered for different reasons of what we're talking.
And I think that should be taken seriously because this is, in my opinion, the second bad decision that he's made in terms, like, I didn't think Mike Pence was that great either. But Mike Pence was supposed to show it's going to be business as usual for Republicans in the same way. And I think that in picking bad partners and picking bad people to work with, this does indicate a lack of judgment. Pence is a fucking loser. Well, either way, right? All I'm saying is like it's a lack of good judgment.
Not for vote reasons, but for political reasons, other political reasons. But historically, the choice of a vice president makes no difference. You're voting for the president, and you can have a vice president who's outstanding in every way, and I think J.D. is. I think that all of them would have been. But you're not voting that way. You're voting for the president. You're voting for me. If you like me, I'm going to win. If you don't like me, I'm not going to win.
I'm going to get my J.D. Vance question in.
J.D. Vance?
I'm going to get my J.D. Vance question in. To your point and to Rachel's point, he, has a lot of opinions about childless women like myself or divorced people like yourself. Do you think, well, I mean, my point
but at
is
least
here.
it was said in a friendly manner.
My point is, do you think the Republican Party is getting a little bit too judgy about people's lives when you think about abortion or when you think about what J.D. Vance is saying?
I don't think, look, I think that the Democrat Party is really the one that has the problem. I think they're radical on abortion because they're allowing abortion in the 9th month. They're allowing the death. They're allowing the death of a baby after the baby is born, based on the governor of Virginia. Based on the governor of Virginia, they're allowing the death of the baby after it's born. They're allowing abortions in the 8th and 9th month.
Well, Democrats have denied.
I think the abortion issue is a bad issue. I do. I think it's. I don't think they should push this.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think the Republican Party is actually much less. I think I've made them much less radical, perhaps. But the Republican Party, what we're doing is bringing it back to the states where everybody wanted it. Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives, everybody wanted abortion brought back. They didn't want Roe v. Wade in the federal government. They wanted it, everybody wanted it back.
But the majority of Americans oppose Roe v. Wade being overturned.
They don't know about this. Right now, they're voting. It brought it back to the states. Now, I happen to believe in the 3 exceptions. Ronald Reagan believed with rape, incest, life of the mother. I do. I think most people do. I think most Republicans do also.
They do.
But if you take a look, right now they're doing, it's an amazing thing. Out of the federal government, it's in states, and people are voting. And I will say, Ohio is, let's call it a more liberal version, has been approved. Kansas, the same thing, a little bit surprising to a lot of people. But the people are now voting, and it's taking this issue that's been going on for 52 years and has torn our country apart, and it's giving it to the people to vote on. And they're voting. And many states have already voted. Others are in the process of voting. And it's bringing it back to the people and a vote of the people. And it's not at all radical. And again, you have to follow your heart. I happen to believe in the 3 exceptions. Most people believe in the 3 exceptions. Most Republicans believe in
over 90% of abortions are voluntary.
The exceptions. But they don't want to see an abortion in the 9th month or the 8th month. Almost everybody agrees to that. And they certainly don't want to see, in the case of the governor of Virginia, the former governor, I might add, who said, we set the baby aside and then we decide what to do. Meaning, what do? We execute the baby. That's a radical, horrible position. And some people want that. I don't want it. Most people don't.
Thank you. Can I just pivot really quickly to another question?
This is what's the problem with voluntary abortions. I mean, you guys know what I think about abortion, right? I'm in favor of abortion. I think abortion's fine. I even think late-term abortion is okay. The reason why is that I don't think it's okay, but I don't think the government can make a better choice on it than the parent can. And I think the amount of government oversight in making the decision will cause more harm than good. And so basically, like, I think obviously, like, abortion is kind of a medieval thing to do. It's awful. But I think that you should obviously be able to do it. And I think that the majority of people that get late-term abortions get them for very serious reasons. It's not like somebody just decides 8.5 months into the pregnancy, wait, never mind.
You brought up health, Harris. You're an active man. We see you golfing all the time. But
also, I'm saying it does happen, right? It does happen. It's just that I think that it happens so infrequently, and the legislation and the creating of rules around preventing it from happening will create more harm than good as a net outcome. I think that it's bad too, but I don't think that you can make a rule that can prevent it from happening in something that's bad without there being a lot of collateral damage. I understand that, like, that's not a great answer to have. It's not a great way to look at it, but I think that's the best way to look at it. They should be rare. Yes, and they are rare.
If you win, you'll still be president at 82.
Yeah.
Which is older than Biden is right now.
But not
Would you-
mentally. Look, mentally.
Here's the question.
He's shot. But most people.
Would you consider?
Most people. I know many people in their 80s and their 90s that are in great shape. Some of our greatest leaders. You look at throughout the world history, the greatest leaders, some of the greatest leaders in the world were in their 80s.
But here's the question. Would you consider stepping down if you felt that your health was declining? Or would you?
Oh, absolutely.
And who would make,
I think I'd know.
How would you make that decision?
I think I'd know. Look, if I came onto a stage like this and I got treated so rudely as this woman treated
Oh, my goodness.
me, and I'm fine with it because she was very rude, sir. Very rude. That was a nasty, that wasn't a question. She
Sir,
didn't ask me a question. She gave a statement. That wasn't a question.
I repeated your statement, sir, actually.
You said you would. You would
Oh,
make that
absolutely.
decision
If I
to step
thought
down.
that I was failing in some way, I want people to be sharp. I'll go a step further. I want anybody running for president to take an aptitude test, to take a cognitive test. I think it's a great idea. And I took 2 of them and I aced them.
Well,
I took 2 of them. But let me ask.
Yeah.
I would like to have.
To be fair, this is as good of an answer as he could give. It is. This is as good of an answer.
People running for president, and I don't mean because they're 75 or 85. I think anybody running, I'd like to do it. People say it's not constitutional. I would like to have something passed where you can do it. I think we should know. I mean, I've watched what's happened in the last couple of years under this gentleman, and our country is a mess. We have inflation.
Here we go.
The
Here we
millions
go.
of people falling in. We have Afghanistan, which was the worst, most embarrassing moment in the history of our
Like,
country.
oh, shit, he's
What
doing
he
it
has
again.
done to our country, and her too. What they've done to our country, she has been a horrible vice president. She's considered the worst vice president in the history of our country.
Mr. President.
But would you consider taking the cognitive test?
Mr. President.
I would love to
and
do
make
it.
it public.
Well, I've already taken 2 of them, but I'll do it again.
Mr. President, how do you intend to...
I suggested, Harris, that let's take one. I said, Joe and I will go and take a cognitive test. Now, I'd do it with her, too. I would do it with her also. You know what? She failed her law exam. She didn't pass her law exam, so maybe she wouldn't pass the cognitive test.